deep state consists of approximately 2 million people worldwide that are controlled in one way or another and operate within governments and agencies, typically not in the best interest of the public good.
Tonight,
tried to be critical thinkers. Critical thinking has got us into this position where now we kind of say to people, every idea is an equal one.
the rise, fall, and resurgence of QAnon.
And I think we need to be really, really concerned.
The movement's frightening future that impacts us all. Good evening and welcome to a special 6 News presentation. I'm Connor Alforque. It was born in the dark recesses of the internet and somehow slithered into every aspect of public life. 15% of Americans in a poll from June this year said they believe the government, media and financial worlds in the US are controlled by a group of Satan-worshipping pedophiles who run a global child sex trafficking operation. That unfounded theory is the core tenet of internet-based conspiracy, QAnon. Its popularity peaked during the Trump presidency. Its ideology fueled the Capitol riots. But as prophecy after prophecy failed to materialize, the number of devotees dwindled. And while its following may be smaller, it is still sizable. Which is why QAnon cannot be dismissed as some fringe internet cult even in Australia, because its dangerous brand of critical thinking is here to stay. That's according to one Australian professor who fears QAnon or movements like it could metastasize into terrorist organisations. Tonight we'll also go inside the mind of an adherent, exposing a cynical and warped world you could be sucked into as well.
Do you want to free yourself?
It's not a conspiracy, it's fact.
You guys know what this represents?
Tell us, sir.
Maybe it's the calm before the storm.
QAnon has taken the world by storm.
I find it deeply offensive that there would be any suggestion that I would have any involvement or support for such a dangerous organisation. I clearly do not.
You know, that bananas conspiracy theory that supposes that Donald Trump, as president, is waging a secret war against an elite claque of powerful pedophiles.
Now, according to QAnon's false conspiracy theories, the inauguration was an elaborate trap.
Now to the conspiracy theory on the verge of gaining a foothold in Congress.
A conspiracy premised on the belief that Donald Trump will save the world with mass arrests, military tribunals, and executions of his government enemies, otherwise known as the deep state.
I am the chosen one.
May sound nonsensical, but everyone from mothers.
I feel like it was more this pandemic where she started saying stuff about the government's trying to silence us by wearing masks, and China is behind this.
To respected intellectuals have fallen down the QAnon rabbit hole.
Possible alien life, like pedophiles, and it seeks to tie all of that together.
In 2017, the conditions were ripe for QAnon's spread. A perfect storm had been brewing, according to University of Melbourne professor Lauren Rosewarne.
It was perfectly timed to lockdowns. People were spending a lot more time indoors doing their socialising online, and therefore it became an outlet, and you got into these thought bubbles and spent a lot of time in it. But perhaps the biggest factor, you had a president who was not opposed to QAnon, who actually said a lot of things that looked like he was okay with it.
Q is an operation, one that requires substantial military training to understand even the simplest parts. The vast amount of the public does not have the ability to understand the depth of this operation.
The fact that you guys are attacking us and making us look like we're crazy when we're just trying to save some fucking children pisses me off.
Active QAnon adherents rarely agree to speak to the media, but remarkably, Robert May agreed to an interview over social media DMs with 6 News.
I was first introduced to the foundations of the, to keep the subject easy, darker side of what was one of the government's largest problems in the 1970s. The next few decades were a rough ride as I did not fit in with what was going on. Without this experience in the darker side of public service, I would not be able to understand what we see happening today.
An outspoken proponent of QAnon, he says he
was observing the operations that preceded what is referred to as Q posts and observed those as part of my standard operating procedures.
It was Robert's long-time scepticism of government that no doubt made QAnon so alluring, and in this ideological echo chamber he stayed since late October 2017. But those in Robert's company are dwindling. Earlier this year, the conspiracy fractured. Believers had their faith shaken. To many, Biden's inauguration only confirmed that Trump had done the impossible. Lost. There had been no great awakening, no storm. And following the plan just got a whole lot more difficult.
Please, President Trump. Please, I hope you have a plan.
If we're going to see that there's a decline, I imagine it's because all of Q's predictions have never come true, right? And how many times will people start readjusting their thinking to, oh, Trump will be back in office in January. Oh, no, okay, well, let's postpone it a couple of months. Eventually, you're going to get to the point where you're thinking, I'm not sure that this is actually that accurate. Seems a little bit like bullshit.
Predictions are only carrots hung out to cause reactions from specific parties. Predictions are also used as dampers or exciters to help with the control of the public and the media. These things are called predictions by those that don't speak the language.
Why is this conspiracy so complicated? It's ever shifting. Like whenever one of the conspiracies doesn't get fulfilled, they just change it.
Which is the genius of this business model, really. I mean, credit to them that you can just completely shift and now we believe this stuff and people are on board with it. Look, I don't know what explains that. I think if we could work that out, it might be a way to help deprogram people because there is a cult-like element to this.
QAnon may even be too extreme for one of the internet's biggest and most well-known conspiracy theorists, Alex Jones.
Fuck you! Fuck you!
When asked about that, Robert May said,
in every movie there are characters. Without mentioning names, most people that you see in public regarding this issue are part of an agency of one type or another. The vast majority of people that you see are controlled by both blackmail and money to do what their bosses say to do.
Q tells us stuff in all of its lies, is what I'm saying.
You keep interrupting me.
Because you're lying! Because you're full of shit! That's why, because every goddamn thing out of you people's mouths doesn't come true. And it's always, oh, there's energy, and oh, now we're done with Trump. You said he was the Messiah. You said he was invincible. You said it was all over. I will not suffer your Q people after this. I knew what you were day one, and I know what you are now, and I'm sick of it.
Conservative-leaning news outlets like Rebel, Fox, and even Sky have often been accused of being controlled opposition over issues like their COVID-19 coverage.
You're a paid actor from the deep state. I call you out.
Shit, I've been caught.
Yes, you have been.
The cult of QAnon
did a bit of unraveling after President Biden's inauguration.
They didn't get mass execution. All they got was a really lovely inauguration.
It's been 9 months since Q, the supposed secret government operative and prophet of QAnon, last posted online. Between 2017 and 2020, there were 5,000 cryptic messages. The last was on December 8, a since-deleted pro-Trump YouTube video. It's Q's longest ever silence, leading some to believe it was the final post.
It's basically what I was doing anonymously before, but never as Q.
The HBO documentary series, Q Into the Storm, sent the QAnon rumour mill into overdrive. Speculation aside, Watkins was an influential figure in the QAnon underworld. That was until he simply threw in the towel, declaring the movement over after Biden's inauguration.
We gave it our all. Now we need to keep our chins up and go back to our lives as best as we are able.
Those remaining desperately tried to keep the conspiracy alive, scouring old posts for Q drops or clues and proposing new dates for the storm, the day when Donald Trump will take down the cabal of Satan-worshipping pedophiles.
Well, I don't know much about the movement other than I understand they like me very much.
They are very much against pedophilia.
If I can help save the world from problems, I'm willing to do it.
Following Trump's departure from office, adulation turned to resentment. In private Telegram channels, some QAnon adherents blasted the former president for being a total failure and extraordinarily weak.
Hey, fuckwit! Are you with the media?
This is the front line in Australia's war on QAnon. Not all are adherents, but whether they're protesting lockdowns, 5G, vaccinations or the mainstream media,
Yous are fucking liars, yous are cheats, you've been lying to Australia.
it's QAnon where this sort of ideological zealotry finds a home.
We know that vaccine hesitancy has a history longer than QAnon, but it's QAnon that gives a fuel and a politicization to this stuff.
Theories that are attractive because, in part, they're true, according to Professor Lauren Wosewarn, and herein lies the secret to QAnon's success.
That idea of politicians being in the pocket of certain corporations, I don't think anyone doubts that. So that there is part of the reason QAnon has such success, because there are threads of truth here, but that doesn't mean Democrats are sacrificing babies. Equally, politics itself is, and I've worked in politics, is a field that has a disproportionate number of egomaniacs.
So that's how we got from distrust in government to a pedophilic and demonic cabal of Satan-worshipping elites.
No, not as simple as that. I think you've got to look at socio and demographic factors in the US. For example, I've spoken about lack of quality of education. You also need to look at some of these conspiracies disproportionately thrive in people who haven't had much education, right? You know, they're often rural communities who have felt the brunt of globalization and a whole lot of other social factors, more so than people who live in cities. So straight away, you've got that thing of, if you look at the data where who voted Trump, there are also your poorer places, people who have, you know, long resentment because their coal mine closed in 1968 and they've had no new industry.
So you said there that some of these followers of QAnon are uneducated.
They tend to be less educated than the general, yeah.
But then they say to that the general population is uneducated and they don't have the intellect to comprehend these conspiracies.
Mm-hmm. And this is one of the things I find fascinating about conspiracy theories, particularly QAnon, is, and you could say this is quite possibly a consequence of postmodernism and that idea of there being no single truths and relativism and all the things that we actually like, you know, as an academic, I love these things. But that concept of question everything, right, means that now there is nothing that will actually just accept at face value.
QAnon both shapes and reflects the world we live in, and as such it offers a terrifying looking glass into its flaws. Experts say vast swathes of society have been conditioned to think belief needn't be grounded in evidence, giving rise to alternative facts and a post-truth era.
The influential Oxford dictionaries have declared post-truth the word of 2016.
The Economist has described QAnon as the midwife of a monstrous new era.
In the age of post-truth, we could at least look mournfully back at truth in our rearview mirrors and contemplate turning the car around and returning there someday. In this new age, as whatever comes after post-truth consolidates its grip on us, even that hope will fade. Truth won't just be small and far away, it won't even be on the map.
Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that, but the point remains
alternative
that
facts?
There's 109 deaths from Pfizer and 94 from AstraZeneca.
It doesn't say from
and
Pfizer,
7 from unspecified.
Senator. It doesn't say from Pfizer.
It says 109 deaths from it does so, Pfizer. And it says 94 from AstraZeneca.
That idea that now, you know, Pete Evans or some crackpot on YouTube is as legitimate for some people as a genuine person who has spent 25 years studying epidemiology, that's the thing that I'm not sure we're ever going to be to unravel. We've done this through our media by pretending that some stuff has two sides to it, and not everything does. And I think there are some things that just don't have another side to it. But how do we do that sensitively to people? Because as soon as you tell someone you're dumb, you're uneducated, you're not actually a critical thinker, they put their heels in and get more entrenched to their belief because you can't beat this out of people.
To combat the spread of mis- and disinformation, social media giants have recently removed tens of thousands of QAnon-related accounts, in a vast purge that should signal the conspiracy's demise. QAnon pages, accounts and groups may have been wiped from the big platforms, but its adherents remain. They've simply watered down their language and conspiracies. What that means, in essence, is that QAnon is still there, just harder to find, now effectively camouflaged in the mainstream.
There are also, and this is where it's a little bit worrying in a number of respects, you also look at a rise in QAnon of mums, right? Mothers online who find their way into a QAnon movement because they started in a mother's group that started talking about, worries about vaccinating their kids and ends up now believing that there's a conspiracy around pedophiles.
Yeah, and if we see mums even being seduced by the conspiracy, we could see anyone really, and how bad could this get?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is why, look, there isn't a single solution here. There is a percentage of people in the US who will always feel this way because it's bigger than anything now. It's all, I'm not going to say it's genetic, but it's in them because they've been feeling this way for hundreds of years. So this isn't, I think there's always going to be a percentage of people who are write-offs.
Write-offs?
So let me just clarify, in terms of write-offs, I just mean that you'll never be able to change their minds.
So QAnon's not over yet. We can't say goodbye to it yet.
No, because it gives people something. This is the problem with why religions, remain popular, because people like feeling like there's a reason to get up in the morning, that they're connected to a movement bigger than themselves, that they have a sense of community and shared beliefs, and that also other people are giving validation to some of their issues. And QAnon does that for people.
So fervent are some believers of QAnon, in the US they've been linked to attempted kidnappings, armed standoffs, and at least one killing. The FBI has classified QAnon a potential domestic terrorism threat.
QAnon followers may start targeting them with actual violence.
And in recent months following Biden's inauguration, fears of further extremism were inflamed, with several supporters floundering. So do you think we'll just see people turning to more radical conspiracy theories?
This is a bit like the pendulum swinging. I think that there is, I think it's hard to predict, and it's also hard to imagine what might be more radical than QAnon. My worry would be that it being less about belief and more about action, and then it suddenly becomes more like a terrorist organization. That's when I think we need to be really, really concerned. We don't want things like the January 6th event to happen with people with large caches of weapons, for example. That should scare us.
Clinging to Trump's parting words with hope.
We love you. We will be back in some form.
I think part of it is people wanting to be led, lack of faith in traditional sources of leadership in our culture, which is probably part of the reason Trump was so popular amongst certain people. He was an unconventional leader and didn't seem to them like the politicians who have screwed us over in their mind for decades and decades and decades.
Yeah, and so could this ideological zealotry sort of fuel the re-election of Donald Trump in 2024 if he runs?
This is very much dependent on who does he run against, and also what victories does Biden or the Democrats more broadly have between now and then. So there are many factors at play. I think 2020 gave Trump as many votes as he could get, right? In the sense he milked dry every possible person who would vote for him. I don't think there's the capacity for him to get more, right? There is, I think, a finite number of people in America who will vote that way, who feel this way about him, who will be COVID deniers, yada, 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 right? Okay. Gives them one of the things that they want, which is the idea that this figure, Trump, who was supportive of their movement, who knew about the deep state and was trying to fight the deep state again. They're not quite consistent in what Trump's role is, but he plays a big part, that he, back in the White House, is order restored. It doesn't quite make sense, though, that why he didn't fix all this stuff while he was there. Again, though, obviously there's a massive amount of suspension of disbelief that's inherent in this movement. Yeah.
And just last week was when many QAnon followers believed Donald Trump would be returned to office, the second time since Biden's inauguration that they've made such claims. Robert May gave us a long list of answers to our questions. far more than we have time for tonight. He also told our chief anchor and news director, Leonardo Puglisi, that if he was lucky or smart enough to still be alive in a few years' time, you will know some of what I know. His full answers can be viewed on our website, 6newsau.com. We also want to encourage you to share your feedback about QAnon and this story, so join the conversation by using hashtag 6newsau in the comments below, or you can email us, contact@6newsau.com. We'll be reading out your views on Press Gallery this Thursday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which airs right here on our YouTube channel. On behalf of everyone here at 6 News, thanks so much for your company. Good night.
I'm sick of all these witches and warlocks. They're full of shit. Pumpkin popsums. I'm sick of it.
You keep interrupting me.
And all of it's lies. Because you're lying. That's why. Oh, there's energy and oh, now we're done with Trump. You said he was the Messiah. You said he was invincible. I will not suffer your Q people after this. I knew what you were day one. I know what you are now. Witches and warlocks are full of shit. Pumpkin popsums. I'm sick of it.
You keep interrupting me.
And all of it's lies. Because you're lying. That's why every goddamn thing out of your people's mouths doesn't come true. You said it was all over. You told us the stuff. You. Oh, God. Witches and warlocks are full of shit. Pumpkin popsums. I'm sick of it.
You keep interrupting me.
And all of it's lies. Because you're lying. That's why witches and warlocks are full of shit. Pumpkin popsums. I'm sick of it.
You keep interrupting me.
And all of it's lies. Because you're lying.